You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back to episode 210 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden here, as always, with Pankaj Bhojwani. Farewell to two of our three amazing, universally loved, definitely not controversial heroes from Part the Misfail. Living Legend has happened. Two more heroes have ascended to Living Legend in the form of Zen, Tamer of Purpose, and Enigma, Ledger of Ancestry. And people are just, they're distraught. They're sad to lose Enigma and Zen. Zen was very, people were saying Zen was broken. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, it's interesting. I think I think there's mixed emotions. I'm a little bit sad to see Enigma go, but I know a lot of people aren't. That's fine. That's good to see.
Oh, I'm one of them. I'm absolutely not sad to see her go. Glad to see the back of her, to be honest.
Next, you want Prism.
Yeah, people are rioting in the streets for MST being gone. To your point, for sure, they're gonna love that you call them out for that.
I can't wait for Nu to go. Get rid of that hero. Get rid of all assassins.
All of them? Hey, what did Arachne Huntsman do to you?
I forgot that hero existed, to be honest. How was your week in Flesh and Blood?
Coercive Tendency is a card. Did you...
What's that?
A card? Coercive Tendency?
I don't even know what that is.
Do you even know what the card is? Oh my god. It's a card for contract. Anyway.
Brilliant.
Essentially, it's basically a card for Arachne Huntsman. When they spoiled Arachne Marinette, I was like, oh, I need to go pick up my copies of Coercive Tendency for the Hunted. So when Hunter comes out, I'm going to build Marinette and I'll have Coercive Tendency. And turns out I didn't need those at all. Neither did I need Regicide. So, rip.
I know what it looks like.
My week in Flesh.
I know what the card looks like,
yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what it does. There you go.
All right. My week in Flesh and Blood. I played a ProQuest this past weekend. I brought Verdance because some people know this. I've just been kind of in a hole, not really knowing what to play at this meta. Like, Aurora's not really my jam. Enigma's not my jam either. So I've kind of just been waffling around trying to find a hero that I actually enjoy playing and want to play. So I landed on Verdance for this past PQ. Went 3-3, unfortunately, in the Swiss. My wins were Dorinthia, Enigma. I actually do think the Enigma Verdance matchup, at least the version of Enigma that was popular. I think that matchup is very, very playable for Verdance. And then Zen, and my losses were 2 Auroras because it's rough out there, and then an Azalea.
So
and then I have 2 more PQs.
I was just going to say, you won against a Dory and then 2 heroes that no longer exist. Just saying. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then my losses were 2 Aurora and Azalea. And then 2 PQs coming up this weekend. I'm either bringing Verdance again with a slightly different build, or possibly Nu. Unfortunately, it won't be Mark Nu, though, because I don't think Mark Nu is very... No. I have Morals still. I don't play CRB. I don't like CRB. I never play a deck that I don't like morally or just enjoy playing. I just can't. I just want to have fun, and if I'm not having fun, I won't play well. But it won't be Mark Nu because I don't think Mark Nu is very viable right now with how defensive everyone is. I think Mark Nu was potentially viable when you needed to be aggressive into Enigma, and it gave you an aggressive line of attack into Aurora. But if Enigma gone, people are going defensive. I'm not entirely sure that Mark Nu is the place to be. So deciding between that and Verdance for this weekend. How was your week in Flesh and Blood?
So you've got 2 coming up this weekend.
I've got 2, yes.
Nice. My week in Flesh and Blood was good. I mean, I only got back... we left not too far apart from one another, but unfortunately it takes me over a day to get home from Europe. So I landed back on Sunday, and I also lose most of the day as well because of the time zone.
Yeah, for you, your time zone is ahead of London, right?
Yeah,
so for
correct.
me, it's I left at 4 p.m. London time and I landed 6 p.m. Seattle time. So it's I lost 2 hours.
Must be nice. I effectively lost...
Hey, well, I lost the time going to London.
Yeah, but only 12 hours. Still... Not even that, maybe? 12 hours?
Okay. All right, well, when we meet in Singapore, we'll have reverse stories. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's 8 hours for me versus, what? That's still not that crazy far for you, right?
No, that's a lot. It's 15 hours, 15 or 16
That's
hours.
not that long. I had to travel 27 hours to get to London. Come on.
Oh, when I was talking about the time difference.
Oh, right, sorry.
Singapore's 15 hours. Yeah. No, the whole journey is 24 hours
Okay,
at least.
sure.
Yeah.
All right.
The travel time, yes.
You're allowed to complain then. All right. So I got back Sunday evening, and honestly, I've actually played a lot of Flesh and Blood in the last 4 days, which has been awesome. It's been like 2 short weeks here, Easter, and then there's a public holiday today while we're recording, which is great. So I've been running. I have a half marathon next weekend, and I've been playing Flesh and Blood, and working, of course. I've still been working. That's kind of been my week, which is great. And I have a pro quest tomorrow, which is awesome. I still don't know what I'm going to play, but we'll talk about that in the main topic of the pod. This week I've played a lot of different decks and been sort of testing decks, but also been a little bit of like a punching bag for different sort of testing different strategies as well. So that's always fun. I like playing different heroes and getting a feel for them. I'm not dissimilar to you. Like, I don't like showing up to an event with a deck that I don't enjoy playing, but I don't mind playing it in testing. And sometimes if I think it's just overwhelmingly the best deck, like I will play it. Like, I think if I had come to the conclusion that I was like, yeah, Aurora just is default, like it just is the best deck for London. I thought it was Enigma, just, by the way, to recap. I would have probably just played Aurora, like if I didn't think that I could play something that I enjoyed like Enigma, but it was close enough that, I was like, no, I'd lock Enigma if I was playing London. I have, I'm trying to think back, like the one time I played a deck that I didn't enjoy, I've been very fortunate. I played Briar at Pro Tour Lille and also at the Nationals like 2 weeks later, and I did not like that hero or that deck in that meta, like significantly did not like it, but I hadn't found anything else that I liked and thought was better, so I played Briar during that meta.
For me, it was Oldhim at PT1. I was like, for some reason, we decided Oldhim was the Guardian to be on for PT1. Just that's a whole other story.
That's insane.
But it was that experience where I was playing at a tournament with a deck I didn't like that made me realize I can never do this again. It's got nothing to do with picking the wrong deck because it was a wrong deck, but it was just I cannot play a deck that I don't enjoy and expect to do well at a tournament or just expect to enjoy myself at all. So that was my experience, and like since then I always play something I like. But to your point about testing, yeah, when we're testing, if someone wants reps into Aurora or something, sure, I can like offer it if there's no other better Aurora player around. Although I do have some caveats, I would never play Illusionist, just even in testing. Like, my team knows that. I was like, you want Enigma reps? I'm not your guy. Just don't even approach me with it. I will not be caught dead practicing that hero.
There's some heroes I don't. Generally, I won't play them just because I don't have experience. So, like, the other night, we were playing some Verdance games, and I've played a few games of Verdance, but not enough. So I was like, I don't feel like I'm going to do it justice, because like I'll play Assassin. I've played enough Assassin, even though I don't like the class. I've played enough of it that I'll play it. Same with ninjas. Like, don't particularly like the class, but I've played enough of it that I will play games. Interestingly, I have a question for you though. Not a question, maybe it's more of a challenge. Is that I feel like, Pankaj, you can't say that you shouldn't or won't play a hero that you don't like until you've played a hero that you don't like that's actually good for an event, because you cite Ultim, but that is one of the craziest takes I've ever heard of showing up to PT1 with playing Ultim. I actually played against an Ultim at PT1, one of the Polish team at PT1 playing Ultim.
Oh, well, you won Kano, so yeah, that's free. It's like...
No, he was playing Hard Device like AB3, and I was like, what is going on here? Anyway. Well,
you're making me go into it. Basically, we thought there would be more controlled Starvos, and actually, I think Old Impotent controlled Starvo was fine because you
I agree with
expose the elements. You expose elements that crown your ice react in response. And it was actually I went positive into any controlled Starvo I faced. It's just like most of the Starvos I faced with Casino, and Oldham's so bad into that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So anyway, we just made a wrong read on the sort of Starvos that would be.
We've all been there. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
News.
And I was there again this past meta, which is why I failed in predicting the winner of the event. And as you were so kind to rub in again that you predicted Enigma was the best deck for the past meta.
Well, no, but to be fair, I just genuinely thought it was the best deck. Like, I mean, I also thought Enigma was the best deck at Worlds, and people also thought I was a little bit... I don't think... Actually, that one was a little bit less crazy, but there was a lot of people like, it's Dash.io by far and away, but that started to shrink as we got closer to the event, I think. But anyway, should we get into the news, Pankaj?
Let's move on to the news. So we had a Battle Hardened this past weekend in Santa Clara, and that was won by Tao Tao on Arachne Marinette, and the PQ Plus was also won by him on the same hero. So shout out to him for that. Arachne Marinette making a little bit of a splash. I do think
you're excited.
It's been a little bit... Yeah, I think it's a little bit slept on. And this was a very interesting build as well, with a lot more dagger pumps than I think a lot of people were expecting. And I think it does make the mark condition a lot more difficult to block. I think there was a little bit of a saying, if you will, where they're like, oh, you just block the daggers, you prevent the mark, and the marionette doesn't do anything. But it turns out when the dagger's coming in for 5 because they played cut from the same cloth, or you think it's like 1, you put a piece of, I don't know, like you discard a prevention effect like a haunting rendition or something, and then they go scar tissue, and then suddenly you're like, this dagger's like bigger than you expected it to. The mark does land, and it's just a lot more difficult to block. So I think it's a very, very cool build.
That's really interesting. One of my challenges with assassins, like one of the things that I have a few things about assassin that I don't particularly love, but there are some things that, like, I do. Pankaj knows I've spent my time playing some assassin, especially in the lead up to London. I played a lot of marionette and a lot of slip through the cracks in my lead up to learn those heroes, and is doing my service and duty for team PCG Invasion. But one of the things I struggled with playing marionette was like the dagger dance. Like, they really lent into, I think rightly so, flavor-wise, the daggers for marionette more than ever before, and I think it's really cool, right? One of the challenges I found was like, I don't like spending 2 resources, and the conditional of, like, depending on how I've drawn or how my opponent plays into this, like how effective my hands are going to be was one of the things I didn't like. But that's quite interesting to say, well, let's lean into that even further and spend more time on those daggers and almost like double down on that. It's definitely, I wonder now, like, now that people know about it, how effective it will be, but it seems good. Like, I'm certainly interested by it.
The other piece of the puzzle is Kiss of Death, right? Like, when you go Kiss of Death for 7, Kiss of Death's already a card that is very scary to block because of Tarantula Toxin. So even when it's Kiss of Death for 3, you already don't really want to block it, but then now suddenly it's 7. Because of the dagger pump before it, and then you can also scar tissue the Kiss of Death, and then suddenly you're very on rate marking your opponent when you scar tissue the Kiss of Death. That's already a card they don't want to block.
Yeah.
The amount of damage that the deck can put out, like out of nowhere, can really catch people off guard and be very, very surprising.
Yeah.
Other than that, also, I mean, I do think there's also a fair bit of, you know how there's some level of value you get from opponents not having the experience into your hero, as they might if your hero is a little more prominent.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, a trick like, okay, you have a Calicera and say you're flipped into Black Widow. You're flipped into Black Widow and say you have a Kiss of Death. You go Kiss of Death and you have a way to give it a go again, like Stains of the Red Back, which is prominent in the list. You can discard to Black Widow on the Kiss of Death. You give it go again. On the next chain link, you flick the Kiss of Death and the Black Widow triggers again. And that's like a sort of interaction which a lot of people like just don't know or maybe aren't expecting.
Yeah. Because
they just haven't played against the marionette a lot. So you just get a natural equity that you get when you play a hero that people haven't practiced against, which we have seen time and time again, right?
And Assassin is definitely that class. Like, Assassin is a class that will punish you for not knowing how to play. It's been since day dot, right? Well, yeah, actually, honestly, even since Arachne, right? Like, I feel like if you didn't understand how to play against Contract and you know, if you're a deck that was like susceptible to potentially fatiguing, like, it was really relevant to know how to play against that. It was the same against Azuri, like how you played into the Azuri hero ability, but also the different game plans they had, whether they're more control build or more an aggressive build. They were very different how you should play into them. It's continued through into Nu, definitely. And like Nu is like a super punisher, I think. And now into Marionette and Slippy, I think, and you really see that. And I think what's interesting, we were set down between a round casting at Pro Tour London, and Brian kind of asked about Prism. He's like, do you think Prism's good for this meta, or like, do you think, you know, people just kind of got caught off guard, and as we get into the later rounds, they're starting to get a little bit found out. You know, people are testing into it, obviously, before top 8, things like that. And, you know, I was like, well, I actually think that more applies to Assassin, honestly, but I don't disagree with that statement. But and that's one thing I find a bit of a difficulty. I can't wait for the comments this weekend. All the Assassin players come out of the woodworks and side with Pankaj and tell me I'm massively wrong here, which, you know, I may well be. But I find that when I sit on the Assassin side, like when I play the Assassin games, you know, the more you play them, you're like, oh, if my opponent like blocks this way or they do this turn, it's like playing Dory. You're like, oh, it's gonna feel so bad.
Yeah, you're right. There are definitely moments where my opponent guesses correctly and I'm a bit bummed. But I think there are ways. I think a lot of the skill in playing Assassin is to mitigate that as much as possible.
Sure.
And I think there are ways to that. There are obviously spots where you kind of just need to bluff. But I think I find myself bluffing less and less, to be honest.
Just playing tightly. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't really bluff, and it's like they block a certain way. You always have an alternate play line depending on the way they block. I think new, especially like when you're picking up new, like the Mistblade stuff is a very, very important aspect of the hero. Like if you're going to go for a line on your turn which involves swinging a Mistblade, you need to have a line that involves you got your Mistblade on hit versus your Mistblade didn't hit, and like how bad is the difference, and you need to like make the call on your blocks whether you want to go for that risk or not. And oftentimes you just, if the difference in value is too high, where like if you miss a go again, your turn is kind of bricked, you just shouldn't be going for that kind of stuff. And I think Assassin has a lot of play lines that fall in that category.
Yeah, makes sense.
Next thing in the news, Zen and Enigma have hit Living Legend. We'll be discussing more on that in our main topic. But something I do want to touch on in the news is Zen exactly at 1,000 Living Legend points. Which is so interesting given that we've had a history of heroes hovering at 998 for months. So the fact that Zen just hit 1,000 like the first weekend PQ season is a little bit of a new thing. And two MST heroes out of here.
Yeah, I heard that some representatives from Legend Story Studios were actually DMing people and asking them to play Zen for the weekend to try and get more win. No, I'm kidding. Of course they weren't. Of course they weren't doing that. But the Briar thing is so funny when Briar said at 998 and people were like, did we miss a PQ? Like I remember this whole thing. Someone was like, no, there's a PQ where Briar definitely won. It got misreported or something. And now it's at 998 and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's so funny that like, you know, we almost sat in a similar position with Zen. But honestly, I mean, if it didn't LL this weekend, it would have LL next weekend. And it needed 3 wins, right? Which is just like, it's just funny that it got exactly 3 wins and not 4 or 5. But actually, when you look at it, right, it's like, yeah, I mean, it has been tracking that way as not one of the prominent heroes in the meta. That's why when we talk about, you know, what's next, we're not going to talk about Zen. We've done that. The impact with Zen leaving is basically nothing, honestly, because the hero has not been prominent in the meta. But goodbye. And I'll say a sad farewell to my good friend Enigma, Ledger of Ancestry, who I had a lot of fun played Enigma at Worlds. Actually, to be honest, that's all I really did. I just played Enigma at Worlds, but I enjoyed the hero, you know. I would have played it at London if I went.
The impact of Zen leaving is mostly being felt by just Zen players, really. Everyone else is just like, cool. Anyway, moving on. Everyone's more focused on Enigma leaving.
Yeah, one thing to add on Zen, like Tiger Taming Kakara leaving, so of course the signature weapon leaving with the 2 heroes, Cosmo, Scroll of Ancestral Tapestry for Enigma, and Tiger Taming Kakara for Zen. I don't think it's not nothing, I don't think, the Tiger Taming Kakara leaving. Not that it was, you know, it has been played by the heroes at this point, but I think that weapon was really good, and could have had a future where it was played.
I did see a build of Katsu with it a long time ago. Like, sort of like the month MST released, I saw someone playing that on Katsu. But yeah, to your point, I do agree that it is definitely a weapon that, in a sense, had potential, especially since a lot of the Tiger generating cards and Tiger payoff cards are base Ninja and not Mystic Ninja.
Yep. Interesting. Should move through into the Command and Cookout. If you want to get your questions in,
let's do it.
For the Command Cookout, please email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com or drop a comment in the YouTube comments below. If you're an Arsenal Pass patron, you can drop a comment, or a question rather, into our community Discord, or you can do what a few players did at Pro Tour London and bring us some handwritten questions, Pankaj, including this question. I got a shout out. I've got another question in a couple of weeks' time from a number 1 Reinar fan who asked me to do my Reinar impression for a picture, which I did, just to let you know. This question comes from someone else that I didn't catch the name of. I think there's a few people coming up just over the weekend with questions, Pankaj, unfortunately. If you are going to give us a question, please do write your name on the piece of paper as well, so we can make sure to shout you out, or your community, or whoever you want shouted out for the question. This question.
Okay, but do put your own name down. Don't write us some nonsense question and put someone else's name down. Yeah, don't do one of those things.
Yeah, it'll be Inception. This question comes from Pankaj Bhojwani. No. So this is a question that was given to us at Pro Tour London, and actually we've got a bit of a cameo answer to this question as well, because when we got handed this question, there was someone standing next to us, a prominent individual who we will talk about when we get to the answers to this question, who gave us their thoughts on this question, which was great. The question is: throughout the history of the game, do you think there have been decks, strategies, or archetypes that remained undiscovered? If so, can you think of any? And this person mentions a shout out to Kano in the Cheerio Briar meta coming to mind. I'm not so sure about. I mean, I think Kano had, by the time we got to having Cheerios Briar, I guess Kano was not really around. Okay, because Kano didn't really have a breakout until PT1. So, okay, yeah. So maybe Kano just was really good in Cheerio Briar meta.
But Cheerio Briar meta didn't have Everfest yet, right? Cheerio Briar was
Correct.
Tales of Aria just released.
Yeah.
So that means there was no Wildfire?
No Wildfire. But I have another point about Kano. I think Kano was probably... I think Kano was probably insane even before then because you still had access to all the card draw. You had pots. You still had Spindle, which Spindle is insane. And you could still use other pump effects. You still had Aether Flare. And I think Aether Flare, like stacks, potentially was a really powerful thing you could have been doing. I don't know if it would have been good into Briar. Especially because they had access...
Cheerios Briar... Yeah, Shock Charmers and Plunder Run.
They didn't play
Cheerio
Shock
Briar
Charmers,
was
though. They didn't play
Run.
Shock Charmers, I don't think.
Well... I mean, sure, but I mean, if Kano did anything,
sure,
they would.
They would have, yeah. But, I mean, it could have been a deck that was actually reasonable. I would say that is... It's always hard with a question like this. Like, you can't say for certain on a lot of things if it was true. But I could see that. I have a few call-outs, so I'll just read through some of the ones that I had, Pankaj, and then maybe you can give me some commentary. Some of this was before you were playing the game. So one actually that comes to mind is the Crucible of War meta, where we got given Gaze the Ages, for instance, where I actually think Kano was probably broken in that meta because that meta was quite slow. It was dominated by dash, like control dash decks, and like Ninja, and the aggressive decks of the format were kind of fine, but it's before Monarch, so before we got Chain and things like that. I think Kano was probably insane, honestly. And I remember trying to play it and trying to make it work, and it felt like, now thinking back to it, there were definitely things that I should have had in that deck that I didn't. That would have been pretty ridiculous.
So I think we have an assumption here that Kano is good into like the slow, dirtly strategies, which he is, but I think that was post-Wildfire. I'm not entirely sure if that theory holds up pre-Wildfire. Like, what are you stacking towards?
Stir is like a very powerful card, I think, and you had access to good Stir lines, I think. And you could stack... I think the thing is that at the time, no one understood the ability to stack tomes. And you had access to the tomes already. And you could do...
All 6, right?
Yeah, you could do the same tome stacks and almost like create your own Wildfire with Aether Flare in that meta. So I just think... But we just didn't know about it, right? People just hadn't gotten to that point yet of developing. Kano was 30 life. People were like, oh, it's so weak. How do you even get to that point? And then outside of that, what would you do against like the aggressive decks? But actually that's where like Kano thrives. But at the time it was kind of like people just didn't have the right builds. I mean, people were playing like attack. I was playing at some points playing Sunkiss Moonwish in like the deck, right? Like
oh my god. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, it was wild. So that's one. Welcome to Wraith meta, I think, we know about the Ninja Turtle like Katsu drone deck that won the very first Constructed Calling. If you may be new to Flesh and Blood, maybe you don't know about that. The first ever classic Constructed Calling was won by a deck that really revolved around an outbound card, which is Drone of Brutality. Shout out to Mr. Brendan Patrick, who was one of the pioneers of that deck, along with Sasha Markovic. But the actual crazy deck was Drone Bravo, and this is what the devs had, but no one ever got to, was this Drone Bravo. I think Chris Gehring might have had this deck, and actually played it against Brendan and Sasha when they got invited to visit Legend Story Studios very early on, at that first ever calling. And they're like, oh, you have a drone deck? That's cute. Here's our drone deck. And then absolutely wiped the floor with them, as I've heard it told, which is quite funny. And that deck never really saw the light of day because drone was very quickly banned. And, well, actually, Arcane Rising and Crucible came out, and Flesh and Blood was, there's obviously COVID things happening, and then drone got banned. Monarch, this one's a little bit different, Pankaj, but I would say Chain was just so egregiously broken that during that Monarch meta, before Seeds was banned, there was absolutely zero reason to not be playing Chain. Shout out to Tyler Horspool for winning Vegas with Prism, and then quickly calling us out for that. I'm going to maintain that Chain was absolutely ridiculous, and that matchup was good.
Well, I mean, that specific Prism deck had a whole bunch of shadow tech for it, right? Which is why it managed to take down a bunch of chains.
Sure, we'll go with that. Yep.
I mean, that was my understanding of it. Again, I'm going off of... Like, I wasn't playing during this time, but I remember hearing about this, taking a peek at the Prism list, being like, oh yeah, it has... I don't remember what shadow hate it had, but a bunch of like
it just had
stuff where it was against Shadow Hero. It's like it's kind of overrated.
It just had all the fatigue plan and like the Art Lightning fatigue sort of setup plan, which actually we tested a lot into. I'm not sure other chains had tested into it and had the setup for the in game, but yeah. Anyway,
Cool.
Tales of Aria. I think Ultim took a long time to be top tier, but I think from day one that hero was insane. People just didn't get to the builds early on of what it should have looked like. And the other one that I think maybe never got discovered or never had its time, I do think Max with High Octane at some point should have been good. And I think it took a long time for people to start playing more refined lists, and I never felt like it got fully worked out before High Octane got banned.
You were thinking of bringing it to Barcelona. I remember that.
Matt
When we
Rogers
showed
played
up
it at
for testing,
Barcelona.
I was being like, say again?
Matt Rogers played it at Barcelona.
Yeah, and you were almost going
Yes.
to, and then you last minute got cold feet and pivoted to Dromai.
Yep.
But yeah, I could see it. Yeah, I think Max at High Octane definitely it has the potential to have been completely broken. Speaking of decks that took a long time to be top tier, I think Dromai falls in the category too. I think when Dromai released, it was like a year of like before she had this whole long stint where she'd be like the second or third most represented at callings and stuff, but not a single copy in top 8 for an entire year. And then people finally realized how to play her. And this was like before, and this was well before Tome came out even. So that was like another shift in the deck.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like that, I played Dromai at that Nationals before Tome came out, and obviously, like the tech that the team had come to, like Nick in particular, was like the time skippers, which I think was a big level up in that meta for gaining you the Ash that you needed to drive that hero. But yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, a lot of Illusionists. Do you know what? That's the arc of Illusionists, dude. Like, look at it. Prism, when it first came out, OG Prism was like the second or third most played deck at like so many events and did not put up results. The first ever Road to National season, it was like the second most played hero, and it had the worst conversion rate because they used to publish conversion data of like heroes played, top 8 wins. It had by far the worst conversion rate. It had the worst winning rate versus how much it showed up as well. It was just insane. And then you just spoke about Dromai, look at Enigma as well. Enigma, when it first released, people were playing that hero. People played that hero during National season, and it was not good.
I will contest that Enigma is a different case, where Droma and Prism, like it took a while for the builds to coalesce and builds to get good. Enigma was just not performing because of Zen. I think the builds for Enigma didn't change too much. Like after Zen got out of Warband, it's not like Enigma like drastically changed the builds. It like changed a few cards, but most of it was still the same. Most of it was still just baked up in Traverse Mirror Guy, right? So
yes and no. I think people were playing a lot more ward heavy decks, I think, and trying to play some very interesting cards that weren't good. And the other thing I would like to say is that I think people were doing the same. Like, I agree on the fact that Zen just held it back massively. Like, until Bonds got banned, I massively agree. It was held back by Zen. But I would say the same of Prism when Chain was around. Like, Chain massively held back Prism because it was so insane. I would say that Dromai was probably the lesser extent of that, honestly, in terms of the way it was held back. But yeah, I think the other two, there's some similarities between how Chain/Zen held back the two Illusionists at that time. You go.
I was going to change topic to another potential undiscovered archetype in Fab's past, but okay. Well, one thing that comes to mind, like we're talking about like these older metas where it was like slower and stuff. I just wonder, I see what like Eugene C does with Rhino.
I knew you were going to friggin' tease me with this.
Like, there surely had to be some point in the past metas where stuff was slower. Like, the crew meta they're talking about where apparently Dash was legit. Like, how was Reinar not, like, tearing things up, right? Like, Scab... Like, the deck hasn't really changed. Like, sure, he got a few upgrades in heavy hitters or whatever. Most of the deck is still this freaking same thing. So, like, how was it not like destroying stuff in like crew meta? Like it feels like there had to be in a build where you sort of do like what Eugene does, where you just like roll scabs like a bunch and you just like kill people.
Oh, it did. So it did. So actually, this is a good point. The reason I didn't put this on the list is because it was discovered, which is the Crucible of War meta, which was heavily dominated by Dash, myself, Jason Long, and Isaac Olsen. Who people wouldn't be familiar with Jason Long. Isaac Olsen was the first ever calling winner, a limited player. We spent a lot of time, and particularly these two, spent a lot of time on Reinar. And the deck that, because I couldn't, we didn't have a nationals that year because of COVID, but they got to play nationals. The deck that we cooked and they took was Claw Rhinar. At the time, no one played Claw. Everyone played Club. And they showed up to the first ever New Zealand Nationals with this Claw Rhinar deck. And honestly, the deck was insane. And it's crazy. At the time, no one... we were the first ones to play Claw. People were not playing Claw. And so it did get discovered. I think it did take... And it honestly didn't take that long. Crucible of War had only come out 2 or 3 months before. But then we quickly went to... Obviously, there was COVID impacts. And then we quickly went to Monarch. At which point, Rhinar became unplayable because of change. But for that 3 or 4 month period... that Crucible of War meta. Yeah, Rhinar, I actually think might have been the best deck. Claw Rhinar was pretty insane during that meta.
Especially if you're saying Dash was the menace. I mean,
Yep.
Brute is just good into mech,
Yep.
right? It's just I mean, at least if it was the mech's trying to set up items and stuff, Arc Smash was a card back then. I forget when it was released.
Yeah,
It was
correct.
surely around.
Crucible.
But yeah, so
Crucible.
just okay. Yeah, so...
Yeah, the deck was good. The deck was very, very powerful. Yeah. The last one I want to shout out to, and this was our special guest who was next to us when we got the question, and I checked with him that we could say this, but Brian Gottlieb was stood next to us when we got handed this question, or when you came back from getting this question and showed it to me, and said, "Oh, I have one for you." And I said, "Can we say it?" And he's like, "Yeah, you can say it." Bright Lights Limited. Brian told us that there was a Dash database draft strategy that was very, very powerful in their internal testing, and they never saw it at Worlds. They never saw it showing off during the Limited, and he wouldn't tell me anymore, Pankaj. But
Yeah, he just teased it and didn't tell us what the strategy actually was. So
there you go, though. Straight from the horse's
you
mouth.
Bright Lights enjoyers, go crack open more boxes of it and I don't figure it out, I guess.
Yep. So no one. No, I'm kidding. Bright Lights is fine. All right, main topic.
Let's go. So main topic, farewell to Zen and Enigma, 2/3 of MST. Before we get into... We have 2 subtopics, but before we get into it, let's just do a brief history of both heroes. So Zen, obviously, got... A lot of people remember this, got half of its LL points when Art of War and Bonds was still legal. Zen had a very interesting arc from his LL points, where half of its LL points were on a very different version of Zen than the first half of it. Almost similar to Viscerai, except Viscerai had a 2-year gap before it started getting LL points again. Zen sort of didn't really have the gap, but it was a very, very different build, right? After Worlds in Osaka, it won a bunch of callings and battle hardens on just this more mid-rangey with defense reaction type build, whereas before that, all its LL points were on the triple Art of War, Bonds of Ancestry stuff.
Mm-hmm. It was about, from memory, it was about 700 points. I think it got to through that I think it was it a PQ season into a national season, or just the national. It might have been some battle hardens callings. Because US national. So basically, it was just national season, and there might have been a calling or 2 or something, because of course you had the calling at US nationals, things like that, and some battle hardens, and then basically after national season, they're like, okay, Bonds is banned.
Did it get 700? I didn't know it was that much, but it was...
Because I think when, if you talk about post-Worlds, so Nick won a calling. Was there another calling winner on Zen as well? Or was it just 3 or 4 battle hardens?
I don't remember the full details.
Yeah, I think it was...
I think it was
the one calling, and then 3 or 4 battle hardens, and then we go into ProQuest season for... Road to National season just been, and that it gained closer to that 900 there, and then another battle hardened win.
Right. Well, you said Nick Butcher won a calling on it.
Yeah.
I think so did Charles Dunn, right? I feel I remember Charles Dunn winning a calling on Zen as well. I think it might have been Osaka calling.
Yeah, it was Osaka.
itself.
You're right. It was Osaka. Yeah. Yep. So two calling wins. But I guess post Worlds. I was kind of saying post Worlds, but yeah. From the World Championship time onwards, 2 callings and I think maybe 3 or 4 battle hardened wins, and then plus Road to National season. So I think it was around 700-ish that it set out prior to Worlds, maybe 750 even, and then it got another 200 or so afterwards. And then, of course, the last 6 points last weekend.
Yeah. And then, actually, in terms of Zen's ending, it was a little similar to Briar's, where Briar was 900 something for a long time and it kind of just limped over the finish line.
998.
Well, I say limped over.
No, it went with a
ended
bang.
up winning US Nationals. Yeah, it ended up winning US Nationals, but it was limping for a little bit, and after it suddenly Math Briar was a deck, and then it won US Nationals. Enigma basically only started racking up points post the Art of War bans, post the bans that reduced offensive overlap. And very famously, that ban and suspend announcement said that Flesh and Blood's not a game where you stick a dragon and ride it to victory. And following the aftermath of that ban and restricted announcement is Enigma winning a whole bunch of stuff because she's the deck that sticks a dragon and rides it to victory, which I think was very,
It's not
very
the only thing she
interesting
does.
and ironic. It's basically what she does.
No way. Does lots of other things.
Anyways, so since that offensive overlap ban, she's kind of just been steadily racking up points and has been like straight up, this is the best, if not one of the best decks in the format. Won Worlds, won a bunch of callings and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's the calling wins. I think that obviously Worlds and PT combined, that's 400 points. I think. I want to say, or 200, 100 maybe, so maybe 300 points. But then, there's also, I think, 3 callings in there, quite a lot of Battle Hardens, a number of them Michael Fung winning. And then, so you say that's about half. And then she's also had 2 ProQuest seasons in a row to National season. I just want to set the scene because I think we're about to talk about a question in terms of Living Legend. So I just want to kind of give context to what seasons they've had where they've been one of the better decks, right? So where Enigma's been a tier 1 to 1.5 deck has been effectively, through my eyes, 2 ProQuest seasons, a Road to National season, a Worlds, and a Pro Tour.
And I guess technically a national season as well, if you want to count last year's nationals, where
Nope.
Zen was. Yeah, I mean, Zen was doing Zen things, and
Enigma was unplayable.
which was legal during then. Yeah, exactly. But she was legal during then.
Yeah, sure.
If we're gonna count the stuff where she was legal.
But I want to point out where I think
it's
it's been good, because we've said Zen had this gap of a few months where it was not racking up points, right? Through Road to National season, it was definitely not racking up the points. It kind of 2 point did limp home a little bit because it wasn't racking up points. Enigma, once it got started, it went, right? So you've got almost 2 kind of different stories in a way, where one hero racked up a significant amount of points in the first kind of third to quarter of its lifespan, and then the other where it didn't do anything for the first quarter and then just went for the last 2/3, say, or the last 3/4 of its life.
Yeah. It's a little Icelander-esque in that a lot of its points came from big events. Mm-hmm. And Pablo as well, we won a calling on Enigma, and after also went ahead and won a PT on Enigma, and just was responsible for a whole bunch of points on a hero, just like how
as
Michael
per
Hamilton
usual,
was
though.
responsible for 500 of Icelander points.
True,
What the hell, Michael?
Pablo's done it a few times now, though. That meme, the Grim Reaper
Yeah.
Pablo meme of sending heroes to Living Legend. We need that back for Enigma. Ultim, this, it's so funny.
Yeah. Cool. So those are brief histories of both heroes. We obviously missed out a whole bunch of details because we want to talk about our subtopics. Now, subtopic number 1, which I think I've been hearing a bit of rumblings about. I'm very curious to hear your take on this, Hayden. The overarching question here is, were these Living Legends too quick? Because MST released May of 2024, I want to say. It's mid or late May. It's been basically under 12 months. It's been under 1 year that 2/3 of the heroes in that set are now not legal in Classic Constructed anymore. And sort of related to this, tangential to this topic, is that Aurora is also looking to potentially LL even faster than that, because just going by the math, if she continues her dominance from the first weekend, she will be LLing by this ProQuest season, which puts that LL rate even faster than Zen and Enigma. And so the overarching question for the subtopic, Hayden, is, were these Living Legends too quick?
So I think we've spoken, just to clarify, 31st of May 2024 was the release date for Part the Misfail. There you go. So, yep, correct. 11 months, effectively. I think we've spoken about this topic at times over the past few months because of... we did it over Christmas. We did a bit of a deeper sort of conversation on it. We also spoke about it around Zen, where we thought it might Living Legend, and there was obviously questions and conversations around Living Legend then on that pod. So I'm not going to, go crazy on this, but I think yes and no. So I'll give you my no. My no is because I think there is a lot of heroes in this game right now, and so I think we want to see heroes living legend. In theory, you don't want last in, first out, right? That's not the precedent you want to set. But I'm also okay with there being a difference of, yes, an older hero living legends, a newer hero living legends to a degree. And there's obviously the positives and negatives to that, and I'll get to the no in a second of why yes of why I think the living legend's too quick. But I like that kind of dynamic to an extent as a player to freshen up the meta. The other reason I think that maybe no, it's not too quick is that I think this is beneficial for the game. These Part the Misfire heroes in particular going. I don't sit on the rhetoric of that it's Part the Misfire was a mistake. Like, I think they purposely wanted to print a powerful set, and I'm okay with that. I think that's also good for the game. I like doing powerful shit in my game. I want to do that in Flesh and Blood. I am one of those people who does want to do powerful stuff. The yes of it being too quick is, of course, just impact on players, card collection, playability of your hero. Saying, oh, I'm a Zen player or an Enigma player, and having less than a year to actually play your hero, having been someone who's played Magic in the past and been like, oh, I'm going to play this deck, and then 6 months later, a new set comes out and it's not viable, and then 2 years later it rotates out anyway. It was never a good feeling as someone who played Magic, for instance. So I do understand that piece. The other reason I think it's potentially a little bit quick is obviously it's meant that other heroes haven't been racking up living legend points. I'll point to heroes like Dash and Azalea, for instance, who have then stagnated in their ascent to living legend. So I think that's probably my way up. I think that nicely encapsulates how I feel about the living legends here.
I want to touch a little bit on the power aspect that you were talking about. I think it's no secret, right? I mean, they've kind of almost openly said it as well, that MST was as strong as it is because they were entering a new market, and they wanted to appeal to the market, and they released, a set and heroes in it that were very, very strong. And I think I want to bring Aurora into this conversation as well, where Aurora is part of their new player pathway, right? So they're like, hey, here's your first strike deck, and then here's the armory deck, and it just came out in Rosetta. You go play this deck. It's very, very strong. You can win things with it. And a question that comes to my mind is that in this quest, in their sort of journey towards making these new products appeal to the new market, the Japanese market, new players in the form of Aurora, are they pushing these heroes to the point where it's actually detrimental to the very cause that they're trying to achieve? Because now all these new players that picked up Aurora, all the new Japanese players that picked up MST, just don't have a hero to play anymore because these heroes were so strong that they LL'd so quickly, and now they're they're just left without those promises, in a sense.
Yeah, no, honestly, that's a great point. I think when I spoke, I also spoke specifically about Part of the Misfire. I kind of forgot we were rolling Aurora into this. So I have a bit of a view on Aurora. Just to go back to the Part of the Misfire part, and particularly Japan you spoke about, I do think that is an aspect. I think, let's say I'm a player in Japan, my entry is Part of the Misfire, and I got my Traverse, and I got my blinged out Chi, and then, I can still go and play Nu if I want to, right? Like, it's not like there isn't a hero still there that I can take my cards over to, but I agree, it's not the same as being a illusionist player, or being, like, really identifying with that specifically. No one's being like, I'm a Mystic player, right? Like, that's a bit of a niche, right? Being like, I'm a Mystic player. But just to say, I think there is some amount of, like, ability to use their cards.
Well, yeah, I think you're coming at it from a collection perspective.
I am. That's
like when if you speak about the blinged out Chi and a Traverse being used in other decks, I'm talking more of they bought into this particular hero or whatever.
Sure. Then in that case, this isn't the last time they're going to see a hero like this, like in terms of that identity, or even a Mystic Illusionist, for instance, right? Like we've seen Light Illusionists twice at this point, right? Like they've resurfaced the Prism player, they've resurfaced the Chain player, right? Yeah, kind of. So it's not like LSS aren't ever going to appeal to those players who maybe identified with that first hero of theirs ever again. So yeah, I do think it can be a bit of an issue, but also, while people identify with classes and heroes specifically in this game, they also often people don't just identify with one, right? They identify with maybe a subset of those. Maybe it's like, I like sorry, Pankaj, to hurt your ears, I like illusionists, right? I really enjoy. So, do I jump to Prism? Or actually, what I like is this kind of idea of doing really powerful things. Maybe I just jump over to Aurora, or which might cause another problem we'll talk about. Or, maybe I jump over to like Florian, for instance, because I really identify with this idea of like setting up these big turns, for instance. So I think that's kind of my view on Part of the Spell. I just want to quickly say on the Aurora piece, because I kind of missed that part. I think I feel a bit differently about Aurora, and I do think Aurora is going to Living Legend too quick. I really like your point about it being this introductory hero, this hero of focus of like, hey, you want to play the game and you want to get into it, and you want to play a hero that does something, fairly linear but quite cool and is powerful. Here's Aurora for you, right? It's a competitive deck. But I think there was a bit of an issue in terms of printing another supplemental product, or like, I guess the what's the deck called? Not First Strike.
Armory deck?
Yeah, the Armory deck, sorry. The Armory deck is a good thing to have. I think, maybe Skyward Serenade or printing these additional buffs might not have worked out how they wanted it to, and has actually been too much of a buff to the hero, and now is going to Living Legend too quick. I would think if Aurora Living Legend in, say, 16 to 18 months, so let's say it survives all of this ProQuest season, you have the ability to play it for your national season, and then at Living Legend maybe at the end of the national season, I would feel more comfortable, or probably the next ProQuest season, say after that, it lives through the next ProQuest season, I'd feel more comfortable with that than how quickly it's going to Living Legend.
So I'm curious why you don't have that same sort of timeline idea for Zen and Enigma then. Like, why is it ideal for Aurora like 16 to 18 months, but like Zen and Enigma leaving in 11 months in your eyes is fine?
I think they have different purposes. I think when they've come from that core set, so if you're someone who got in at Rosetta, there's still a lot of heroes for you to play in Rosetta, right? If I got into Part the Misfail, and I now was like, oh, I got all my cards for Part the Misfail, I'm gonna play all these heroes, I'm gonna play this game, I'm playing Part the Misfail, and all of a sudden I have access to just playing new. I think that feels, I don't know. I think that set was so powerful that it's like, I don't think it was ever going to stick around. I think that was a different intent from LSS, honestly. Whereas with the Aurora thing, it really feels, I agree with you massively, like they've really focused it on as like an entry-level hero. They've put an Armory deck out for it, right? They've added additional support. So let's say, okay, I'm a new player, I buy the Armory deck this week. I mean, in 3 weeks' time, my hero might not be legal, right? Like that is, and the Armory deck's only been out for like 6 weeks. Like I think that is the issue in this case. Whereas, if I'm someone who 6 months ago was like, I'm going to play Enigma because it just won the World Championships. I mean, you still got to play it for 6 months. You got a ProQuest season out of it. You got 1 week of a ProQuest out of it. You got a bunch of armories out of it. I don't think it's as bad in my view. I just think they have different viewpoints in terms of how they've been propelled forward, and it lines up for me that, hey, this is a really powerful set. These heroes, I'm talking about Part of the Spell, go and hit Living Legend within a year. That kind of lines up to me a little bit. A set that was a little bit, still has power to it, but was a little bit more in line with where they want to go forward with the game. And you have a marquee hero in Aurora, and then that Living Legends in 9 months. Like that doesn't align with me, I think.
So to be clear, I do think Zen and Enigma leaving the format is better for the health of the game overall.
Sure.
Like, obviously, because and honestly, I think that can apply to New as well in terms of the raw power level of these heroes was just a tad out of bounds, and so when they leave, it is better for the health of the game. I was approaching this question more on a sort of zoomed out, high level view of a hero. Heroes, 2 out of 3 heroes were released for a new market, and they are now gone less than a year outside of them coming out in a new market. And so agnostic of their power level, agnostic of the impact on the game and the gatekeeping list. Because honestly, if you ask me, Enigma should have allowed within 2 months of it coming out in terms of health for the game.
Yeah, but no one asks you.
But yeah, okay. So stepping back from that, talking about just the general
I think we did.
idea of the general idea of me saying, oh look, new heroes are releasing into a new market, and the players can't even play that hero a year after they come out. Is that like too quick?
I think I spoke about that.
No,
I think I spoke about that. I mean, put it this way, right? LSS have released 2 sets since Part of the Misfail, right? 2 full booster sets are about to release High Seas. So you could say almost 3 sets. You got 3 more weeks of PQs before they're going to release a new set. Are they wanting to sell more MST? or are they wanting to sell high seas in 3 weeks' time? I think the answer is they want to sell high seas, right? So I think that having a year, in their view, with a power, to your point of like, a new market and these players, yeah, I mean, they want them buying high seas. So I think from like a perspective of putting it into a new market, I think it's kind of worked out how they would have expected it to. And just lastly, the last thing I do want to say though on the health of the game thing is that I don't actually think I think having powerful stuff to do is good for the game in spoonfuls, like in teaspoonfuls, in small amounts, right? Like in controlled amounts. Like I do think powerful things in this game are good, and ebbs and flows of how powerful a format is versus not. I think people forget that like we've entered into formats that have been powered down, and they've actually not been that exciting, honestly. In my view.
You're thinking heavy hitters meta?
Yeah.
Is it? I mean, I think heavy hitters meta was amazing actually, and I think there was power in that meta as well, because Kano and Prisms was stuff that came out that was being discovered as the heavy hitters meta progressed. I think that actually made that meta a lot more exciting than people remember. I think people just remember it as like KO and Victor and Hatchet's story, when in fact there were these other angles to the meta that were being discovered as the meta evolved. But in any case, I think just for me, I'd be a little more comfortable if you told me like 2 heavy hitters heroes, or like say even like 2/3 of the heavy hitters heroes were LLing by this point, that to me sits a little bit better than MST heroes, just given like the within 1 year does feel a little bit on the quicker side for me. But again, given the power level, I am happy to see these heroes go.
All
right, let's move on to our next subtopic, which is what's the meta looking like now? And I don't know about you, Hayden, but I've been hearing a lot of chatter around CYB and just a general idea about Dirtly and Fatigue style decks coming back into the format. What are your thoughts?
I've definitely heard about slower decks. I think Scepter Florian is the big one that I've seen through like Discords, through Twitter, through like conversations this past week as being like, the hero to come out that might be a breakout hero this weekend at ProQuest week 2. CYB I've heard less of, because I think CYB is still friggin' terrible into Aurora, so maybe that's why I've heard less of it. But not something I've heard as much of as the CYB piece, but definitely, the Guardian conversation, the Jarl Victor conversation, the Florian, like the Scepter Florian conversation, definitely the Earth hero conversation just in general, I think, so Verdance. But then the other piece of the conversation is, hey, Aurora's still around and the hero's still good. And it won 27 ProQuests or whatever it was last week.
Yeah, so I feel like there's been a lot of doomsaying. I've been hearing a lot of doomsaying.
Really?
People are like, oh my god, like the meta is now just like full like fatigue, and everyone's going to time, and it's like second, third cycle stuff, and it's like everyone's just healing.
That sounds awesome.
Like
I wish it was that meta.
Well, I'm just like, guys, Aurora is still around. I'm like, I don't fully get that doomsaying, because I think full combo Aurora still destroys a CYB deck. Is just like full combo Aurora. Like, I think if you're playing the Aurora list at Worlds, which a lot of them didn't have the full combo equipment because they didn't need it, right, in that meta, because Enigma was still around, and you needed to just have consistent pressure into Enigma, and Enigma was putting down the Dirtly decks. You didn't need a full combo package, so Aurora's got away with it. But now they should be adding those packages back in, and I think Aurora is very good into a lot of these slower strategies that people seem to be doomsaying about. And it's just, I don't agree with the doomsaying part of that I seem to be hearing a fair bit about.
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of... I think there was 2 sides to that conversation, by the way, about the combo cutting in the lead up to Pro Tour, where I think if you believe that Enigma was the best deck, and you played the matchup, the thing that you didn't want to see was your opponent siding in, like having access to 3 Arc Lightning and 2 to 3 Flicker Wisp in the matchup. That's actually what you were scared of. So I think, but if you thought Aurora was the best deck, people were more focused on the mirror and just, like you say, thought the best way to beat Enigma, I think, was consistent damage, like on the flash instant speed builds. So I think there was a bit of a 2 sides to that, I think it is interesting, because I think there was not necessarily a clear-cut consensus on that. But I think there should be right now, which is that I don't understand why you'd be playing less than 3 Flicker Wisp and 3 Arc Lightning and Crown of Dominion in your deck at minimum.
Exactly. And with that Aurora setup, like, people have focused a lot on Enigma leaving, and a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I can go play my CYB Jarl now, or whatever. because Enigma has left. And I'm just kind of just like, I feel like people have focused so much on Enigma leaving that they've forgotten that Aurora is still sticking around, at least for the remainder of PQ season. And full combo Aurora is now just an actual deck and an actual strategy, which is, in my opinion, still putting down the super dodal, super fatigue stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that if we had a ban and suspended announcement like after PT, they might have just gone ahead and hit Flicker Wisp, to be honest. I think the reason that people have this view, or they get sort of tunnel visioned into the Enigma thing, is that PQs are not Pro Tours, right? PQ metas are a lot more spread. And I think when you have two heroes living legend, which would have had an impact on people's pro quests, Enigma Zen would have shown up in some numbers in pro quests for the next 3 weeks if they were still legal, along with Aurora. Then people start to focus on the gap left. And it's like, so if you're an Aurora player, right, and you go to your pro quest, like realistically, if Aurora's the best deck in the format, when you go to a pro quest, for most pro quests, the meta's going to be so spread that Aurora's going to be like 15% max of your meta. It just the way it works out at these local levels is like the meta's a lot more spread. But when, you know, the best or perceived decks that can impact you are Aurora, maybe even Enigma as well, and if they're both 15%, all of a sudden it's 30% of the meta that you're like, oh, these decks are so strong and powerful. So I think as soon as like that kind of reduces that, and also Zen I think is good against a lot of these dirtly decks as well, just by the way. I think that once that kind of reduces, people start to then focus, and I don't think it's incorrect to do so because your meta does, you know, the thing that you're now worried about is smaller. Start to think about the other things, you know, which is like, oh, these, you know, the CYBs and the Dirtle and whatever. The doomsaying piece, I mean, I think that's just whatever, because there's still, regardless of whether you think that that's going to be more prevalent in your meta, Aurora's still going to be in your meta as well, even if it's 15% of your meta. So, yeah.
I think to your point about the 30%, like what makes up the 30%, like it was 15% Aurora, 15% Enigma. I think the new 15%, aside from Aurora, is actually Florian. I think that's just the hero that's getting the most buzz, and particularly the full stack Slepter Florian, which seems like is a deck that you're getting a lot more experience on. Do you want to talk a bit about?
Yeah, I've played a lot of this deck this week. I think, you know, popularized by Alex Vore at PT London. I think Shoma played something similar as well. Similar idea. Shoma played Shoma Yamamura, PT Amsterdam champion, and a few others as well. Like I'm sure there were other people playing this deck. It's not like it was a secret or anything. Like people definitely knew about it, but it's been refined, I think. And I think what's interesting about the deck is that, you know, you talk about full stack, and I think the reason I don't use those words is I think it can be a little bit of a misnomer. Like this deck isn't just purely trying to OTK people or just stack up big turns of rune chants. It's definitely a part of the deck. Definitely a part of the deck is stacking up these rune chants. But I think, you know, just the combination of Scepter of Pain plus Millennium Tree is obviously just a really powerful combination of cards that allows you to extract value and utilize Millennium Tree really well. And you can use Ninth Blade so easily in this deck as just a value card after 2 turns of like, oh, okay, I play a Millennium Tree, I shock you on this turn, or even maybe the turn before I played like an incantation, I shocked you. If you're online, that's already your rune chance you need to cast your Ninth Blade, for instance, off like a 1 card. But there's other turns where you're like, no, I've just stacked up. I've just, you know, created like 20 rune chants, and then I'm sending my Ninth Blade or my other free attack. And in the meantime, you're doing just great value things where you're not stacking those. Like you have Felling of the Crown, you have Plow Unders, you have just a bit of more of a traditional Florian shell outside of those stacking rune chant turns. And when you're online, it's insane at that point.
So I have a question regarding that. I do feel like every time I hear about this list, I think the main power play that people talk about is Channel the Millennium Tree with the Scepter of Pain. And so I do wonder how much of its success so far has been people not bringing AB3 into Florian. And what happens if you show up to a PQ and people know you're on this list and they're like, cool, I'm going to side in my AB3 into you. And then how much of the deck's power just gets gutted by people doing that?
I don't know. I think that's what I want to find out. Honestly, that's kind of my next point of testing is like, I want to find that out. That's my question as well, because I think it's significant. Like having played, my experience so far with AB3 has been playing into like Verdance or the Mirror. And I think it's significant. Like Millennium Tree just kind of sucks in those matchups. You're just like, okay, like I play it to like help me pitch stuff and get through my turns and then like get a few rune chants. But it's a big difference to when you like play it down and over the next 2 turns, you use 2 cards to, you know, depending on whether you're online or not, create like 8 to 12 damage. Like, it's a big difference of 2 cards doing 8 to 12 damage as opposed to, you know, like, and I say 2 cards because over the next 2 turns, right? But as opposed to, you know, where you're just like, oh, I leak a damage here and get a rune chant, and now all of a sudden you spend like 4 or 5 cards to do like 4 damage. Like, that's a big difference, right? So obviously you're getting pitch out of your opponent, but at that point you're playing a slower matchup. So yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I do wonder which decks can do that. There's a deck that's really interesting to me, which his name is Jarl. Big fan of my boy Jarl, and I think he can potentially have some game into this deck, because I think you deny the best play in that deck, which is the Scepter Tree sort of line.
And then you blow up Grasp of the Arcanite as well. And then, but I guess Germinate is still a card you probably have 100%. To worry about a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you brought up Verdance, and I feel like Verdance into this version of Florian, if they aren't like siding and Reaping Blade or something, they're still keeping Scepter of Pain. I feel like that matchup should be incredibly easy for Verdance. Aside from just having AB3 and enough blues to pay for it, also just the presence of Scour feels like it should make the matchup not too difficult. You do need to be careful a little bit. Yeah, you be careful a little bit. You don't just like waste your Scours on like small number of rune chants. But I don't know, man. If you like, people have been again like dooming a little bit about like Dirtly Fatigue type stuff, and I'm just like, I don't think Illusionist is the only thing that keeps down a full sort of fatigue thing. I think the combo decks, the decks that can start into a strong enough combo. We spoke about Aurora, but like Verdance, Kano, even Acilio to some extent. And potentially builds of like some of the heroes we'll talk about. I think those are enough to also just keep down a hero that wants to like fully just dodle and fatigue you.
Yeah, I think Kano is the big one for me. I've actually played the Verdance matchup, and I had the same assumption, but Amethyst Tiara is definitely a card that causes a lot of problems in the matchup for Verdance. So, and I agree on the Scepter thing. Like, you don't get I think you have to do a few things differently, because one of the Florian's challenges is when you play Scepter is you don't have a true weapon, right? So if your opponent has the Arcane Barrier to keep looping, like, you don't have a weapon to finish off the game. Neither does Verdance, though, albeit that it does have this combo. But yeah, so it's actually quite an interesting matchup, I think, weirdly, and actually can easily result in a draw, which is hilarious.
Just a guaranteed draw, just like a deterministic draw. I could see, both players not showing up with a weapon. Yeah, do we want to talk about more Dirtly decks, or should we just move on to like what can fill in?
Yeah, I just don't think they're good. Like, honestly, like, I think there's a lot of these decks that people are talking about and to be fair, like, I've not heard as much of this, but I don't think they're great. One thing that I think is interesting, we saw this at Pro Tour. You got the privilege of casting this match, my friend, which was Decimator Axe Fang. I'm interested to see if people will sort of continue on the Gregor's thought train there. Not seen so much of that, but I definitely know people are talking about it. I think, you know, Jarl with CYB is not good. New with CYB might be fine. We're both not fans of it. But you actually put regular Jarl in the Dirtle decks. I think that's just a good kind of mid-range deck these days, Jarl. But yeah.
Right, Frostfang Pummels. I mean, I think if you're playing a CYB deck, I think I mentioned this maybe on last week's pod or the week before that, but I think CYB New is the best home for a CYB. And especially now that you've freed up a bunch of slots for Enigma.
Yeah, makes sense.
I actually think you might have a sideboard into Aurora where you don't need to bring any of the CYBs, and you just play sort of the build that was favored into Aurora at the PT, which is the 12 defense reaction, the Jacob Clemens list. From Calling Kobe, I want to say, and the Michael Hamilton list from Calling Sao Paulo, which is a very similar list. 12 defense reaction new, and now you no longer need to dedicate slots to Enigma. So maybe that can be your CYB slots for anything else.
Is that favored into Aurora, by the way? You just said favored into Aurora. Is it actually favored into Aurora, or is it just good? Is it just decent into Aurora?
Slightly favored into Aurora. Wow. At least that was from my internal testing. You might feel different.
Not played it.
And I say my internal testing, I wasn't one playing the new because I don't like that style of new at all. I'm talking about the other news on my team against the good Auroras on the team. They found the matchup was good for them. In any case, I think CYB new, if you're looking for a CYB, would be the place to go. But in terms of Dodal decks, I'm with you. I think the rest of them, they're fine. They're decks, but I mean, combo Aurora still exists. So there's only so far you can go on those. We're far from like the Teklo and sort of style meta that I think I've been hearing rumblings about.
Like, I would absolutely love it to be true that we're entering into a meta where people are looking for slower decks, looking to play the second and third cycle. Like, that is my absolute dream. because I think that is such an exploitable meta and would give me the opportunity to play decks like Verdance, to play decks like Rhinar, for instance. Like, give me a friggin' excuse to play Rhinar and I'll be right there, right? Like, if Florian Scepter now is quote-unquote the best deck in the format, which by the way, I'm not saying that, but if that was kind of like the thing, and they're like, yeah, like, you know, CYB News and like CYB Jarls and all this kind of thing, and then people are like, oh yeah, we're going to play, to punish that, we're going to play like Verdance and Kano. I'm like, yeah, give me my Rhinar. Like, let's go right now. But you know what? It's just not reality. It's just not true. It's not happening.
So I'm not exactly with you on the I want that meta to come around, but I am with you on that meta is way more exploitable than people think it is. And I think people are like, oh no, there's no longer the illusionist to guard us from like fatigue type stuff. There are plenty of decks and plenty of strategies within decks that you can come up with that can punish those sort of strategies.
Yep.
With that, actually, should we move on into which deck or strategies now fills the vacuum of Punisher of Dodal decks, which is kind of what Enigma was holding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. Do you want to? I mean, okay. we kind of spoke about a couple of these already. I think, you know, the obvious one is Aurora with the combo loadout, right? Like, really making sure you have the ability to leverage that.
Verdance and Kano as well. And I think, speaking of the Wizards, I think Acelia also occupies this category. I think if you just give the Acelia the space, like, they can just come at you with 7-8 card hands because of sigils and like bouncing it and stuff like that. And then like so and I think that's just not something. It's just there's enough offensive overlap there to like get over a deck that's just trying to stall you out.
You've got Fang on here. I can't see that. Like, my experience with, maybe you've got a different build of Fang. Go for it.
No. There's the question mark. It's Fang question mark, and the question mark's doing a lot of work.
Okay.
Which is let's discuss this because I'm not sure. Because from what I've heard, the Florian players think Fang is a bad matchup for the Florian. Oh. That's what I've been hearing from Florian. But then again, this was not Scepter Florian, regular Florian. I've heard those players say that they don't want to face a Fang. So this is why I put Fang as a question mark over here. I'm not fully convinced because I do think the deck is more fatigable than people think it is, just because it literally number of turns that it has, like the number of reacts it has, kind of thing, which is not infinite. But yeah, so it's a question mark. I was just wanting to discuss it. What are your thoughts?
If there's an indication of how good Fang is into maybe slower, grindier decks, I told Mr. Brian Gottlieb, we recorded a gameplay of our gameplay series that we didn't put out, which is Fang versus Jarl. And he was like, oh, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Jarl also has ice, right? I mean, I feel like it's not just it's a Dodal deck, it's that it's a Dodal ice deck. And I think that makes a big difference, right? Like, Stalagmite, like, it's just not fair.
Yeah.
you just play Fang into a Stalagmite. It's just not okay.
Fang needs such specific, like, hands and things through the game that once you start to run out of those really key cards, I think your ability to punch big damage or do those, because Fang does have a combo setup as well. I think you can, and maybe that's the one, like the more Fang combo deck. I'm just not sure it's enough, honestly. Especially if CYB's involved.
I could totally see it. Also, Fang has a very hard time into all three of the wizards. Mm-hmm. Firstly, Verdance and Kano just mainboard Scour, and then Acelia can just blast a bit of your fealty tokens as well, which is just all right. Another potential question is, again, question mark, is there a Prism build? I think since the loss of Tomes, it's been hard, I think, for Prism to get over like a fully defensive, like even like a Florian type stuff. But I think if we're talking about vacuum of Punisher of Dodal decks, like the one remaining illusionist, you do need to at least look at it for a little bit and consider it. Is this potentially a viable strategy?
Yeah, I think somewhat. I think I have a bit of a thesis I want to end on when it comes to Prism. I think Prism is potentially that. Potentially. I don't think it... I think the problem with Prism is that, say, Florian kind of just accidentally counters a lot of the stuff that you want to do. Like, it just naturally plays Poppers. It plays Summer's Fall, for your auras. Like, it just naturally kind of, unfortunately, doesn't pair poorly into you. And yeah, I think the same can be said of some other Prism matchups as well, unfortunately. Like, this Prism just, its power really its ultimate power really comes from Heralds. It doesn't have Luminaris, it doesn't have OG Luminaris, which is where the power really came from old Prism and that hero ability. So, it's just not the same, unfortunately.
The closest thing it has is I do believe there is still a way to ALS loop people with post tomes. It's just way more difficult to set up. And I think to your point, once you set up a Genesis and if they manage to clear it with just a random Summer's Fall or something, then your entire loop setup is also just now fully bricked. And then so maybe there are games where you get to pull it off and then you actually loop them and you go Bellona and then Bellona has like 3 counters on it.
Yeah.
And Angels are swinging for 7 each. Like sure, but I think given Summer's Falls and like random poppers and random aura hate, I would. And Prism would be a bit of a surprise if there's a consistent way for them to deal with this Dodal stuff. I want to talk about Fi, and honestly, wouldn't mind going into a bit of the other ninjas as well, like particularly Ira and I guess Syndra as well. To be honest, I do think like we are past the point of like Chronose's Rampart type stuff. Right? Maybe Raul runs Rampart, but if we're talking about like Florian, like Chronose's Rampart isn't a thing, and so I think the natural evasiveness of the ninjas in terms of being able to send small attacks, like Kodachi for 1, Kodachi for 2, it's just not something you can keep blocking for the entire game, like in any sort of efficient way. And Fire with Phoenix Flame, Syndra, if they go into like a dagger route, like would they actually play blues again? Although at that point, I'm wondering why not just playing Ira. Like I do wonder whether these decks have builds of them where they can actually punish the like slower Florian lists. Particularly, I think I do wonder whether there's like a combo way to like play Fire where you set up an energy potion and then you go for like a double Spreading Flames turn that's effectively pitchless, and then you just deal 30 or something on that one turn. And then the rest of the game you're just whittling them down with Phoenix Flames, because Searing Emberblade is a very strong weapon. It's basically the combination of Emberblade and Phoenix Flame is basically 4 damage with no cards out of your deck. That's also very difficult to block, at least for the Phoenix Flame, and I do wonder whether there's something there.
Yeah, I think I've had very similar thoughts. I think Fi is very similar. I'll talk through the heroes. I think Fi is very real, and I actually think just take outside of this Dirtle Punisher vacuum that we're in right now, I think Fi also has maybe one of the better chances against Aurora than some of these other decks as well. So I think that's also more of an interest of Fi as well. So I actually think Fi should be on the... If you've got time and you want to explore something that's a little bit different, a little bit more atypical, I think Fi is really interesting. And I also agree with you that I think you want to look at... You've got longevity with Emberblade and your Phoenix Flame, but you've also got some really powerful ability to set up a big punch turn. Like Mask of the Pouncing Lynx is a very powerful piece of equipment, right? So yeah, I think Fi's on the table. I think Syndra is on the table. I think maybe Fi might just do it better, honestly. But one thing I will say is that I don't believe in the Ira piece, so I'm not on the same view of you as that, you should just play, if you want Dagger, you should just play Ira and not Syndra, because I actually think that Ira lacks something that Syndra and Fi have, which is the ability to punch a really big turn. Ira does not have that ability. Ira does have this great play pattern of Kodachi, 3 damage spread across 2 attacks, which is really powerful with a resource left over, but I don't actually think that, like, that doesn't... So, for instance, you're playing as Verdance. Like, I don't think Verdance cares, but it's like, well, okay, like, I'm just going to... You're giving me so much time because you can't do these big punishing turns. I'm going to kill you. Same for, like, Kano. Same for, like... I think there's a few heroes that just don't care. Even if I talk about something like Yao, for instance, right? Yao's like, well, like, I just have a bunch of damage. Like, I'm just gonna... The reason I don't care about your Kodachis is because I'm coming back with big on hits and a lot of damage. So, yeah, that's my view on the ninjas.
Yeah, agree on the Ira piece. I think the builds of Ira would have to change, but those sort of builds that I see would be vulnerable to the first Kodachi being blocked out. I'm talking like even bigger than that, or Cut Through, which actually is a fantastic upgrade for Ira. Like if you haven't played against like Cut Through, that card is actually pretty scary. And to your point, is one of those things that lets them extend, but they do need to hit with the Kodachi first. And sometimes these decks have like prevention effects to stop the Kodachi, and then you're kind of you might be stuck on those. So yeah, I'm with you on Ira potentially being not the exact answer, but yeah, Fi and Syndra, I mean, those decks, I mean, if you're talking about like combo decks and trying to punch like a big turn, I almost wonder whether that Poisoned Blade Syndra build like maybe has something that can be done, right? This meta. I think it's a bit of a long shot, but I think
I got a friend who's pretty high on it.
If it
a friend, a name that you would know as well, is pretty high on that deck, so
yep. Yeah. And then Fi with like, I mean, they're setup pieces, right? That's the thing. I think these decks back in the day, like when Oldhim was around, Energy Potion was a card in Fi, and then Ice isn't really a thing anymore. But if you're trying to punch a massive turn, you can just put that card back in, and you get to have a pitchless turn, and especially off the back of Ignite as well, which is another way to just get a resource on an attack. Yeah, that card is amazing, and this is potentially in the my category of really liking cute combo pieces that no one else plays. But if you're really going for a massive turn, Prowess of Agility, like I feel like Prowess, you could combine the card with your Energy Potion and just have like a 6-card turn into like a Florian and just blow them up.
Yep.
It's probably cope, but it's just I do like my cute little combo stuff. Moving on to other potential answers, the Brutes. Now you've got "Don't Tempt Me" written here, with respect to Reiner, I think.
But obviously, I'm never playing Levia. I think, like if you are trying to look for a punisher of Dirtly decks and decks that want to play a bunch of defense reactions and take their time to set up, there's no better punish than Intimidate. Like, that mechanic is a ridiculous mechanic. The problem with Intimidate is that they've really balanced the cards that they put it on, and that it's not been particularly impactful over formats because of how good aggressive decks are, right? So if we're pretending that this is Aurora doesn't exist, and there's this format of like kind of Dirtle, or you just like say, oh, I think Aurora's gonna be like 10% of my meta, whatever. Like, I'm more interested in the fact that all these people are showing up with Florian and Verdance and whatever, Prism, etc. Then like, yeah, Reiner is phenomenal. Like, what a hero position right now. I think Levia is honestly, like, even putting aside my prejudice for the hero, I think where Levia probably more so shines is in a mid-range format where it gets to say, like, I just have better attacks, like better damage, as opposed to formats where they can be like, well, like, you don't have the evasiveness of Intimidate, and I do play a ton of defense reactions, and I am just going to like put you into the hole that you don't want to be in, which is your hero power sucks.
Yeah, honestly, to your point about Levia's like strongest metagames, I think Heavy Hitters meta was actually Levia's strongest metagame. It was lots of math stuff, and then even the non-mathy stuff, which was Kano and Prism, Levia was fine into as well.
Shout out to Pro Tour top 8 competitor Michael Jakuza, who did play Levia at Pro Tour LA, so he's going to be elated with your words there, I'm sure.
Yep. One thing to your point about like hating on defense reactions and stuff is, I am curious whether Dreadbore is a card that can see more play in this current meta. I just wonder whether there's a switchboard style list for Azalea where they maybe have Sandscour Greatbow for aggro style stuff and they switch into Dreadbore for when the Florian flips up. And particularly, I think just a combination of Release Attention, Battering Bolt. It's just so incredibly backbreaking when you've got your Dreadball passive on it, where they can't play defense reactions. Like, you just see like Florian's like discarding defense reactions again and again, and they can't play the ones in Arsenal either because of Release Attention. I just do wonder whether there is a Ranger build somewhere that can punish these sort of Dirtly type stuff.
Yep, I mean, it might work once, and then the opponent
that is the problem. You play it in Swiss, and then it'll get got, and then you'll play someone in top 8 that knows you're doing that, and you just side of defense reactions, and then you just die. So it definitely has that drawback, and you might fall into a mind games of, okay, if you know they're going to do that, then you switch to your Sandscour or whatever. But yeah, it does... It relies a little bit on the surprise factor.
Just to elaborate on why I think it's the surprise factor is so important is because I think that the other problem is that you're putting into a shell that is just not as powerful as other shells out there. And I think that's the real problem is like Ranger is, so if, for instance, Florian, like I think Florian as a hero is just more powerful than the Rangers. That's my kind of issue with it.
Well, the same thing applies for Reiner in that case, right? Where it's like you're doing the Intimidate stuff and it's a shell that's not as fundamentally strong as like Florian, but it's probably still a very, very viable strategy into it.
Yeah, I mean, it just has a lot of damage, though. So, like, if your idea is, like, I'm going to side out all my defense reactions into Reiner, the thing is like, Reiner's still going to punch you with a bunch of damage, and the deck still defends well. So, if it needs to play value into you, it still can, and you can't because you took your defense reactions out. That's what Reiner's kind of always punished, I think. The problem is that those metas haven't existed, really, so...
Cool. Last bullet point. I don't know. It's not tech close. It's not tech close time to shine. But I'm sure someone out there might think it is. I mean, Heavy Hitters meta. I did see some tech loads come out and play. I don't think it's quite the same because I just don't think it's quite the same. But it had to be said. Otherwise, we'll get a whole bunch of hateful comments. We're still gonna get them because we both dismissed Teklo immediately. But
Yeah, well, right. Let's talk about Olympia. Anyway, I have this kind of final thought about this. So we've kind of spoken about this, and we've almost spoken them in like vacuums, right? Like we've kind of like spoken about them in sections, which is like, okay, we spoke about like, oh, the rise of this kind of slower style of meta. Is that real? How do you then punish that? For instance, I want to take a step back and look at reality, which is that
Aurora exists.
Aurora exists.
Still probably best deck in format.
Yes.
Yep.
So if these slower decks aren't actually good versus Aurora, so our CYB decks, these things that we spoke about, outside, we have maybe slightly different points on this, but either way, I think we can agree that the best of those is Scepter Florian in terms of it does have game against Aurora. Even if it's not favored, it does have game. So my view then is, does it just remain that Aurora is dominant this weekend, and then in week 3, it becomes Aurora. The Aurora counters, like potentially Jarl, maybe Prism. I'll speak about Prism kind of at the end separately. Scepter Florian is then in the meta, and maybe Jarl, right? So then the counter to those, you kind of get this almost like rock, paper, scissors meta of like, okay, Aurora is here, Jarl, and maybe something else is good into Aurora, and then you have these like Scepter Florian becomes the better version of it because it's best positioned. Maybe something like Verdance, I think, is also great as well. Do you get this rock, paper, scissors basically, where Verdance is then, a big part of that rock, paper, scissors? Then the last part of that is you have Prism. I think Prism kind of sets off to the side a little bit because I don't think Prism is favored into Aurora, but I think it's like one of those classic like 45 to 55 matchups. I think we saw Leo at PT really show off the power of Essence of Ancestry, for instance. It does help that matchup a lot. I would also say that it's not particularly favored into... It's really bad into traditional Florian, but into the Scepter Florian, it's like, again, same sort of thing, like around 45 to 55, depending on the builds and where you set up your deck. And then into Jarl, I honestly think it's similar as well. Like it's around this like 40 to 60 matchup, depending on the builds that people show up with CYB or not. So Prism is in this really interesting spot off to the side, and then I think maybe you enter into this rock, paper, scissors meta. Potentially. That's just kind of what I'm seeing could happen in week 3.
Honestly, I could see it too, but I do want to point out that this potential rock, paper, scissors meta is a lot looser than in the past.
Yes.
Where, and I think that is a big, like, how do I say it? Like, okay, don't bash too much, but I think a big thing about not having an oppressive illusionist in the format is that you don't get that level of polarity. Like, you don't get the, oh my god, the Dromai is literally 10% into the Vi, but then is 90% into, like, the something else. Mm-hmm. Instead, you have, like, the Scepter Florian and the Auroras, which is, like, they're, like, 60-40 into stuff and then 40-60 into stuff, which I think is a lot more pleasant. And so you talk about rock, paper, scissors, I could see it, but it's very loose in that, sure, you have the 60-40, and then the 40-60, and after another, like, 40-60 kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and then... the other aspect of this, which we haven't touched on completely, is that a whole bunch of heroes did get a bunch of sideboard slots, right? Like, I think so far, like, Verdance has, like, struggled into Aurora, for example. But now they get, like, 6 sideboard slots back because Enigma left.
Go for it.
The Jarls and the Florians, like, they had to dedicate a bunch of slots just to make the Enigma matchup a potential game. And so
Jarl didn't bother, man.
And then now
Jarl didn't bother.
Okay, sorry, Jarl didn't bother. Okay, like, Florian did. And Florian did. The Assassins did. Oh my god, yeah, we didn't touch on the Assassins very much, but like New, for example, did dedicate a bunch of slots to Enigma. All these decks just got like 6-7 slots back, and I think that lets them enter this rock, paper, scissors. But I think at that point it just becomes like a soup. It's like a massive like octagon, almost like a star, where everyone has like, okay, slightly favored into this and a little unfavored into this. That is what I see happening, with Aurora sort of being a little bit more firmly at the top.
Yeah, I think it always coalesces to a degree through a format as decks win more. Like, I like to think that it doesn't, but it does. And I think if Aurora is the best deck, and then maybe Florian shakes out to be like the second best deck because it has just a great matchup spread, or maybe it's Verdance, right? I think it's probably Florian because it has a better Aurora matchup, unless those 6 sideboard slots you speak about really fix things, which I can't see it happening. Then I think what you end up having is, you have this kind of like 2 or 3 tier system, which loosely can resemble a rock, paper, scissors. But but the thing is, I just go back to is, Aurora is just so good and can make almost every matchup winnable. So I think it's hard to have that, really.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Aurora will firmly sit at the top. But about the 5-6 like sideboard slots back, actually, I think it's not so much, heroes can like tech more for Aurora, but I was thinking, like, for example, for New, now you get to tech more for Florian, whereas previously, like, that matchup was like really, really difficult. Yep. But now you can suddenly make that, if you can make that matchup better with some interesting tech pieces, like, that's the sort of stuff where I see the extra sideboard slots coming in, where like it's helping these decks into the other stuff. Like, I think Jarl into Florian as well. I don't think Jarl was like super happy to see it.
No.
At least previously.
No.
But now, but now they have more slots, maybe you are. Although I guess to your point, you'd think Jarl wasn't dedicating any slots to Enigma anyway. Yeah. So maybe not. But there are other decks like that around, right? So
yeah. The last thing I want to end on is I want to start a petition in the comment section this week. This pod's going to go up before Pankaj heads off to the first of his 2 pro quests, but definitely, a good day or 2 before he gets to his second pro quest. We've got time to convince the man here to not play New. I think we've spoken pretty clearly this pod, Pankaj, that it doesn't seem like New's in a good spot, and I just want to open the floor up to our amazing community to try and help you see the light here to not play New this weekend.
Okay, I've got 3 options. Again, is New or Verdance or Fi. These are 3 decks I was considering.
Fi. Should we cook Fi? That'd be keen.
Yo, I'm down to cook Fi. By the way, do you have a pro quest coming up?
I got one. Yeah, I got one this weekend. Tomorrow.
One this weekend. Okay, and you're playing. Oh, you're playing Scepter Florian. Right, I think is
probably. I've got a few more games of testing after we wrap up our recording for the day. I'm going to play some games of. You know what? I might throw a couple of games of Draconic Ninja somewhere into something, probably Aurora, to see how I feel, and into Florian. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some more of the Florian Aurora matchup and make a decision then. I think my options are Scepter Florian. I find that deck so incredibly fun to play. So it's definitely a deck I would like to play, but I think people have definitely gotten big onto it for this weekend, and I'm not super keen to play a bunch of mirrors. I think the other options are Aurora, of course, or I go a little bit left of field and play something like a Fi, a Syndra, a Dash, a Rhinar.
So I have played a couple of games of the Fi into Aurora. Like, I wasn't just like, maybe it's fine, and jam any games of it. And I mean, the die roll just matters so much.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's just like straight up what it is. But yeah, I mean, the game is very short because of Mascot of Pouncing Link. So really, you kind of get like one spreading flames turn off, like a good one, often an ignite or something like that. And you mask them, and after suddenly they're in a blocking position and you're chilling. But you're still definitely unfavored. You need the die roll to go your way, and you need them to like not see a CLV sigil in the first few turns of the game, and then you can get there. But the game is short enough that you will have games like that, and you're confident in your other matchups, then I could see Fi being very, very legitimate.
Cool. Well, that has been episode 210 of Arsenal Pass. Farewell to our friends Zen, Pankaj's best mate Enigma, off into the sunset of Living Legend. ProQuest Week 2 for Singapore is coming up. We've got a few more weeks of ProQuest season. I'm sure we'll be breaking down the results through this new look format to a degree, post Enigma, post Zen next week, taking a look towards high seas as well. We're about to get, we're very close to preview season. We're a month away from the world premiere happening in Taipei. I'll be there, looking forward to it. And not far in the corner will be Singapore and national season, of course. So it's all kind of happening here. Until next episode, we'll see you next time.